Welcome, friends. Gord's Poetry Show number 1313. Lucky 13 here on Canada's Thanksgiving weekend. It's not Thanksgiving in the States, it's Thanksgiving in Canada. And I don't think it's anything particular in Britain or Australia and any of the other English-speaking territories. But still, gives me some time to read some poetry, have some fun, welcome you all. Now, I have a very big, thick book here. "900 pages of William Horsburgh's biography of American poet and novelist Richard Brautigan. And extremely detailed it is too. Astonishingly detailed. I think it's probably 3 times as long as the entire works of Richard Brautigan put together. But as a portrayal of his life and his participation in the beat poet scene in San Francisco, it is almost unparalleled. In fact, I can't think of anything that even touches it. Keith Abbott's memoir, Downstream from Fishing in America, Trout Fishing in America, is enjoyable, instructive, but this is biblical in its proportions. One thing I did not know, although apparently lots of others did, Jack Spicer, that enigmatic and much celebrated limited edition poet, much beloved by his contemporaries and followers, was an early fan of Brautigan and in some way coached him as a young man in San Francisco, as a nervous, shy young poet in San Francisco. Chapter 19 of this biography. "Brautigan's written a great poem," Jack Spicer proclaimed, praising trout fishing in America and the bars of North Beach. Spicer had supported Richard's book from its very inception, going over the manuscript with him, suggesting revisions and cuts. Jack was absolutely fascinated with trout fishing, Ron Lowenson recalled, and spent a lot of time with Richard talking about it. Spicer's advice became subconscious editing. Donald Allen didn't believe any of Brautigan's books was ever edited. "Anytime you can get Richard to accept criticism is an unbelievable accomplishment," Lowenson observed. "He is so defensive and so guarded, and yet Jack was able to get him to make changes." Jack Spicer also provided introductions to powerful and important literary figures, urging them to read Brautigan's book. Copies of the manuscript went out to local editors Donald Allen and Luther Nichols, and to Malcolm Cowley, far off in Sherman, Connecticut, while Richard Brautigan slaved part-time at Pacific Chemical. Brautigan kept a copy of Hemingway's short stories hidden in the basement of his workplace, under an unused pile of old sheets, blankets, and pillows. He'd sneak down and read, sitting on an empty chemical drum, surrounded by, quote, over 100 barrels of barium sulfate. Now, trout fishing in America by the end of the 60s was approaching bestsellerdom, and I believe at some point sold millions of copies. It is more of a prose poem than a novel, and in those days that was a radical departure. Not such a radical departure today, but in the early 60s when it was written, and in the late 60s when it was sneaking to world fame, it was. Some chapters, if you can call them chapters. The ballet for trout fishing in America. How the cobra lily traps insects is a ballet for trout fishing in America. A ballet to be performed at the University of California in Los Angeles. The plant is beside me here on the back porch. It died a few days after I bought it at Woolworths. That was months ago, during the presidential election of 1960. I buried the plant inside an empty Metrical can. The side of the can says, Metrical, dietary for weight control. And below that reads, ingredients, non-fat milk solids, soya flour, whole milk solids, sucrose, starch, corn oil, coconut oil, yeast, imitation vanilla. But the can's only a graveyard now for a cobra lily that has turned dry and brown and has black fragments. As a kind of funeral wreath, there is red, white, and blue button sticking in the plant, and the words on it say, I'm for Nixon. The main energy for the ballet comes from a description of the cobra lily. The description could be used as a welcome mat on the front porch of hell, or to conduct an orchestra of mortuaries with ice-cold woodwinds, or be an atomic mailman in the pines where the sun never shines. Nature has endowed the cobra lily with the means of catching its own food. The forked tongue is covered with honey glands, which attract the insects upon which it feeds. Once inside the hood, downward pointing hairs prevent the insects from crawling out. The digestive liquids are found in the base of the plant. The supposition that it is necessary to feed a cobra lily a piece of hamburger or an insect daily is erroneous. I hope the dancers do a good job of it. They hold our imagination in their feet, dancing in Los Angeles for trout fishing in America. The Pudding Master of Stanley Basin. Tree, snow, and rock beginnings, the mountain and back of the lake promised us eternity, but the lake itself was filled with thousands of silly minnows, swimming close to the shore and busy putting in hours of max Senate time. The minnows were an Idaho tourist attraction. They should have been made into a national monument. Swimming close to shore like children, they believed in their own immortality. A third-year student in engineering at the University of Montana attempted to catch some of the minnows, but he went about it all wrong. So did the children who came on the July the 4th weekend. The children waded out into the lake and tried to catch minnows with their hands. They also used milk cartons and plastic bags. They presented the lake with hours of human effort. Their total catch was 1 minnow. It jumped out of a can full of water on their table and died under the table, gasping for watery breath, while their mother fried eggs on the Coleman stove. The mother apologized. She was supposed to be watching the fish. This is my earthly failure. Holding the dead fish by the tail, the fish taking all the bows like a young Jewish comedian talking about Adlai Stevenson. The third-year student in engineering at the University of Montana took a tin can and punched an elaborate design of holes in the can, the design running around and around in circles, like a dog with a fire hydrant in its mouth. Then he attached some string to the can and put a huge salmon egg and a piece of Swiss cheese in the can. After 2 hours of intimate and universal failure, he went back to Missoula, Montana. The woman who travels with me discovered the best way to catch the minnows. She used a large pan that had in its bottom the dregs of a distant vanilla pudding. She put the pan in the shallow water along the shore, and instantly hundreds of minnows gathered around. Then, mesmerized by the vanilla pudding, they swam like a children's crusade into the pan. She caught 20 fish with one dip. She put the pan full of fish on the shore, and the baby played with the fish for an hour. We watched the baby to make sure she was just leaning on them a little. We didn't want her to kill any of them because she was too young. Instead of making her furry sound, she adapted rapidly to the difference between animals and fish, and was soon making a silver sound. She caught one of the fish with her hand and looked at it for a while. We took the fish out of her hand and put it back into the pan. After a while, she was putting the fish back by herself. Then she grew tired of this. She tipped the pan over and a dozen fish flopped out onto the shore. The children's game and the banker's game. She picked up those silvery things, one at a time, and put them back in the pan. There was still a little water in it. The fish liked this. You could tell. When she got tired of the fish, we put them back in the lake, and they were all quite alive but nervous. I doubt if they will ever want vanilla pudding again. Trout fishing in America. A classic, an innovator, with many following in its shadow. Let me tell you, many. Someone in whose shadow we'd all like to follow if we only could. John Ashbery, from a volume I believe I've dipped into before, A Worldly Country. Ukase. And as you were indulging in the thesaurus, or more precisely, being indulged, the word rabbits came hippity-hopping along. Soon it was dusk. The weary river passed to ask you the same song over again. The birds, who knew it all by now, were silent, and it was time to mold the analytical to the time-sensitive. That is, to say that it had happened and we were no worse for it. Indeed, the sky and nearby barns seemed about to chime as we were getting our stuff together, ready to leave, as always, though not quite decided what tributes to accept, if night should bring any. What a chump! Excuse me. It is to the wind and the wildflowers I address these afterthoughts, if they can be dignified as such. And I digress, too, in the gloaming where all can be finessed as we are incurably, undeniably aging. Only I can't tell what that feels like. It's so true. Not when, but if. But we'll know it before it happens. We'll recognize us from the way we look at each other, not from any urgent movement forward or anything like that. Casuistry. The false dawn had been implicated, its circularity seen as a rebuke to honest folks, a third largest city of the brain. Others were quick to join the fray. It wasn't our fault that so many appeared spacious in the waning light of February. What, indeed, would they appeal to? There were no precedents for its apparent soundness. Not yesterday's dribs and drabs, the remnants of someone else's feast, I'll wager. And what if a lot of them come back and decide to settle down with their parents, enraptured with home cooking all of a sudden? Will they make the cut? And what's out there for us on another putative fine day? Over subtlety? Our own quadlibets? I'd say our own quadlibets, John, but you know, that's just my opinion. On the Poetry Show, we have dipped into the anthologies, The Best Canadian Poetry. And there is some more I'd like to bring to your table from the 2011 edition, edited by Priscilla Uppal. Jason Haru, The Temporary Empire of Today. The ink of early morning shadow lies wet on the pavement's page. A warm sun irons wrinkled clouds as the wind's voice yaks through the rustling cell phones of leaves. Bees gather like cars at the flowerbed's gas station. Fragile clouds fall apart in the wind. Ants wander around like black keys looking for something to lock. And then the day starts to end, and it's suddenly the hour when trees become inward and private, when silence gets its oil changed, and we feel light as a page about to turn. The sky is a puzzle without any pieces, a jukebox of birdsongs and church bells. The high-heeled sunlight removes its shoes. The dark straws of grass take little sips of earth. From the 2010 edition, edited by Lorna Crozier. Robin Sarah, Messenger. Little stone in my shoe, what have you to tell me? That such a tiny irritant can serve to undermine a meditative mood, hard won from day's commotion by a walker on the mountain. That I am obstinate, who will not stoop or stop to teeter on one leg and tug at sandal straps? Prefer to hope you'll work your way out, same way you sidled in without my intervention? Are you a stowaway, fugitive, or just adventurer hopping a ride to town? A roadside pebble with big city dreams? Are you a terrorist dispatched to tell the plight of kindred tired of being trodden on? Are you a grain of sand, seed for a pearl to my oyster brain? Are you an augurer? You cling and dig in, even to toughened skin, and will not be appeased. Little stone in my shoe, what makes me choose to walk with you a while? What little creeping guilt accepts it as my lot, that you should harry my soul the whole way home? Zachariah Wells, To the Superb Lyrebird, that cover band of the Australian bush. Mountebank dancer and manic mimic, is there a bush ruckus your shrinks can't clone? Bubbly cork pops and glass clinks at picnics, kookaburras cackle when its cover is blown. Alarm panic, siren wail, chainsaw drone. Motor drives whir and black apertures click as it captures your likeness. Trigger snick and battle blast of the shot that missed home. Honey eaters chitter and moth wings flutter, the barking of dogs and the crying of babies, the lunatic howl of a dingo with rabies, wind-bang stutter of a torn loose shutter, all the ringtones of a cellular phone. No song you can't sing, but no song your own. And from 2008, edited by Stephanie Bolster, Helen Humphreys. The vice mayor meets us at the station in a car meant for children's soccer. Bench seats arranged like pews in the back, each one a measured, isolated prayer. The house is lived in now. Only 2 rooms upstairs still marked as his. One the sturdy study, and one the display. My ex-lover keeps the vice mayor talking, so I can sit at the great man's desk, look down into the garden where they had martinis on the lawn. He made a very stiff martini, said the vice mayor earlier. The study seems oddly Canadian, with its wood paneling, cottage windows. A view to the green hills and the sound of the highway. The chair is hard, straight-backed. The desk smooth as paper under my hand. Auden wrote every day. He loved writing, and this is what I loved about him when I first started. It seemed uncomplicated, his relationship to words, but I was just young. I was uncomplicated. Poetry makes nothing happen, said Auden. I could say it makes nothing good happen. The choice is always the experience or the poem. For a while you can pretend otherwise. But it's really like this. An ex-lover I've mostly ignored keeps the vice mayor busy so I can sit at the poet's desk. Love is just the rough draft for the poem, isn't it? Or worse, the idea. The inspiration. I don't want this to be the same tired story of youthful passion fading to middle-aged apology. I don't want to write poems with too many questions in them, or with the bittersweet reflective moment as the geese fly overhead. But it's already happened. It's always already happened by the time you vow against it. The geese don't care that they are a redemptive symbol. At some point, shouldn't this matter? The body is the only truth, said Auden. But no, I don't believe that anymore either. The body is the necessary truth. It's not the only one. I think this view is probably still your view, Winston. I like your neat rows of paperback detective fiction. I like your ratty tartan shopping bag behind glass, and the photo of you stepping out of the grocery with it over your arm, full of vegetables. Don McKay, Sleeping with the River. All that winter as the rains arrived, sometimes as nobody's footsteps, sometimes as ack-ack, sometimes hard bits of braille flung at the house, the mailbox, the woodshed, at the car parked in the driveway, at all that is solid, all that winter leaving the window open to its pizzicati, hearing them accelerate and blend and drown in the river's big, ambiguous chorus, all that winter being swept asleep, thinking river is the only rain that has its act together. Song that has never passed through speech, unschooled, other than us, thinking this must be the voice of what is, as it seizes the theme, pours its empty opera, pumps out its bass line of sea-suck and blues. Song that has never passed through speech. Yes, Don. Thank you for that. Farewell, my friends. Farewell from the wonderful world of elegant language and obsessive metaphor, and the song that has not passed through speech.